At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI garbage. What's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's begin. Light from the denubbed trisector pulsed a venomous red across the three-dimensional battle space projected over a coolant tank in the heart of the Dauntless's command center. From his station at Tactical Analysis, Lieutenant Tavin Tell watched the shimmering light constructs of his fleet, each a sigil of serene blue Elysian light, shatter in sequence. Each sigil blinked out at the exact moment a Katuri lance beam would have struck its core. Like pieces removed from a game board with rules he was only just beginning to understand, favored his opponent. The Katuri Combine, represented by aggressive crimson warglyphs, closed ranks, their vectors slicing off escape routes with lines of fire. War shaped Tavin's species, the Telleran, or rather the idea of war. Their bodies were tall and corded with dense musculature, their skin a mottled gray that mimicked the stony crags of their homeworld. Other species considered their faces, framed by bony brow ridges, impassive, but Tavin kept his jaw set, his breathing measured. To be Telleran was to believe in the contest's sanctity. War was a dialogue of force, a test of will and honor. You stated your intent. You met the enemy in the void, and you bled for your ground. The victor earned his prize through strength. The loser accepted his defeat with dignity. The Katuri, it seemed, agreed with this philosophy. They were just better at it.
Fleet Marshal,
the communications officer announced, the words clipping at the end from the tension in her throat.
Incoming transmission from the Katuri flagship. Grand Strategist Jarok, system-wide broadcast.
Fleet Marshal Yave stood before the holotank, her posture unyielding. She was Elysian, with a lithe frame and a feathered crest, a resolve forged in a dozen campaigns. She gave a curt nod.
On screen.
The image of Jarok shimmered into existence. He was Katuri, descended from soaring predators. His features sharp and hawk-like beneath a magnificent crest of midnight blue feathers, each tipped with a fleck of green that shifted from emerald to jade as he moved. He stood on his own bridge, a faint smirk playing on his beak as he surveyed his own victorious display.
To the valiant forces of the Elysian Coalition,
Jarok spoke, his rich, resonant baritone filling the bridge.
You have fought with the spirit expected of your lineage. The contested moon of Phaeton V1 is now under the Katuri Combine's beneficent protection. We have achieved our stated objective. As per the Article of Honorable Engagement, we withdraw to consolidate our gains. We shall meet again should your Presidium see fit to continue this instructive dialogue.
The transmission cut. The crimson warglyphs on the holotank wheeled in unison, pulling back into a flawless departure array. They had taken what they came for, inflicted calculated losses, and now they were leaving. It was a clean, symbolic victory, and for the Coalition, it was the fifth such defeat in as many months. A low growl of frustration rippled through the bridge crew. Tavin felt a heat rise in his chest. He clenched his hands into fists at his side. The Katuri had allowed them to lose, dictating the terms, the time, the place, and the outcome. The Coalition was a sparring partner.
Damage reports,
Yave commanded. She surveyed the dispirited officers.
Helm, set a course for Starbase Kylo. We are recalling the fleet.
She met Tavin's gaze for a brief, significant moment. Her weary pragmatism unsettled Tavin more than any defeat. The battle was over. An austere calm pervaded Fleet Marshal Yave's office in the bustling flagship's heart. She had polarized the viewport to a soft gray, muting the starfield outside to a collection of faint pinpricks. Tactical maps etched into sheets of brushed metal adorned one wall. Tavin stood at attention before her desk, his hands clasped behind his back.
At ease, Lieutenant.
Yave said, studying the optic data screen in her hands. Her voice was flat, a stark contrast to her command tone on the bridge. Tavin relaxed his stance, but only just. He had served as Yave's aide for less than a year, a position of honor for a junior officer. This summons to her private quarters for a matter so secret she dismissed her own senior staff was a first. She set the data screen down and steepled her long fingers. She looked at him, her expression sharp, analytical. "You are tellering, Lieutenant. Your people value directness, so I will be direct. The Presidium believes conventional methods will fail. They are exploring an alternative." "An alternative, Marshal?" "A contingency," she corrected, her lips thinning. "A deeply controversial one, invoked under the Coalition Charter's Emergency Clause 9. It is a contract with an independent advisory group." Tavin remained silent, his thoughts jumping from mercenaries to strategic consultants. The Coalition had used such assets before, to little effect against the Katiri's rigid, impeccable doctrine. Yave continued. "This is different. This is a species-specific contract." She paused, her expression souring. "We have hired humans." The name jolted Tavin. Humans, a species known only by reputation. They were a rarity in the Coalition, a young species, barely space-faring by galactic standards, hailing from a high-gravity world in an obscure galactic arm. A universal, unequivocal ban prohibited them from participating in interstellar conflicts. The ban was ancient, the First Amendment to the Galactic Concordance on warfare. Every military cadet learned the reason in their first term of indoctrination. "Marshal," Tavin began, the words tight in his throat. "With respect, the ban exists for a reason. All the literature, the historical records, they say humans are too ferocious, too unpredictable, that their inclusion in a conflict collapses all established doctrines of engagement. They are berserkers." Yave gave a dry, mirthless laugh. "That is the common wisdom, Lieutenant. The legend we tell our hatchlings. Behave or the humans will get you. The truth, I suspect, is far more complicated and perhaps far more damning." She leaned forward and she fixed her gaze on his. "This contract is politically radioactive. The Presidium and I will deny it. If this becomes public, the Coalition will shatter. Your new assignment is to be the sole official point of liaison between my command staff and this war advisory group. You will facilitate their request, observe their methods, and report everything, and I mean everything, directly to me. You will observe them and listen. Officially, you are on detached duty for interspecies tactical review. Unofficially, you are the keeper of the galaxy's most dangerous secret." Tavin's gut tightened. "Why me, Marshal?" "Because you're Tellurine," she said. "Your reputation for integrity is unimpeachable. Your involvement will remain above suspicion, and because," she added, her expression shifting to something inscrutable, "you still believe war can be honorable. I want someone with that perspective to witness what is about to happen. Perhaps it will serve as a valuable lesson for both of us." She slid a data chip across the desk. "The vessel is a converted freighter, the Auditor. It will be docking and docking umbilical C7 in 1 hour. Their operational center will be cargo hold 4. Sealed, restricted access. Only you, myself, and the humans may enter. Do you understand?" "Perfectly, Marshal," Tavin said, his voice a low rumble. "Good," she said, turning back to her optic data screen. "Succeed, Tavin. There is more at stake here than a few contested moons." Tavin picked up the chip, rendered a crisp Tellurine salute, and walked out the sterile office. The ship's corridor hum seemed louder now, the crew's chatter more distant. He was separate from them all, as if standing on the edge of a chasm about to meet the cryptids of galactic allure. He clutched the data chip, picturing savage, screaming warriors, blood and fury, and the chaotic energy his indoctrination associated with the name human. Cargo Hold 4 was cold. They had stripped the vast chamber of its usual cargo containers and transport pallets. Oversized environmental controls thrummed and computer servers whirred. Banks of monitors, their design stark and unfamiliar, stood in a functional semicircle, their screens filled with flowing lines of code and shifting schematics beyond his recognition. The lighting was low and indirect. Long shadows stretched across the floor, making the cavernous space feel both empty and claustrophobic. The air smelled sterile, like ionized air and hot circuits from oversized heat sinks. The space felt less like a war room than a laboratory. Tavin had expected a warband. He had braced himself for loud voices, for warriors stripping and cleaning weapons, for the boisterous, aggressive energy of warriors preparing for battle. He found something closer to a library. 3 figures sat at the workstations, their backs to him. They were smaller than he had anticipated, their frames slighter. They wore simple, unmarked utility uniforms of dark gray. As he stepped through the door, one of them turned. She was, he presumed, the leader. Colonel Anika Sobel was a compact woman of an age he found difficult to place. She had pulled her dark hair back in a severe practical knot. Her face was pale, defined by sharp cheekbones, and her mouth was a neutral line. She assessed him with startling light blue eyes, as if he were a new piece of data for a system, something apart from a soldier or an ally. Her expression was neutral. "Lieutenant Taventel," she said. Her words were a statement. Her voice was as economical as her appearance, low and clear, with a flat inflection. "I'm Colonel Sobel. These are my analysts, Lee and Hess." The other 2, a man and a woman, gave him brief clinical nods before turning back to their screens. Tavin offered a formal Tellerine nod of respect, placing a fist over his heart. "Colonel, on behalf of Fleet Marshal Yave, I welcome you aboard the Dauntless." Sobel accepted the greeting with a single sharp nod that dismissed the ceremony. "We reviewed the preliminary tactical summary you provided. It's insufficient." Tavin's brow ridges tightened slightly. "It's the standard package for all incoming advisory personnel, Colonel. It contains summaries of battles." She interrupted, her tone remaining level. "It describes force positions, weapon yields, and casualty counts. It tells us how you fight, yet it keeps the Katyuri themselves a mystery." "It details their ship classes, their doctrinal arrays, their history of engagement." "That is how they fight," Sobel repeated, emphasizing the word. "I need to know how they live. I require access to the Coalition's complete unredacted intelligence archive on the Katyuri Combine. Everything. Cultural analyses, economic reports, linguistic studies, physiological data, shipping manifests from captured freighters, stellar cartography of their core worlds. Every piece of data you have ever collected on them, down to the most seemingly trivial detail." The request was staggering. The archive contained the Coalition's most sensitive secrets, information gathered over centuries. To give it to an outsider, a human, was unthinkable. "Colonel," Tavin said, "that level of access requires an extraordinary level of clearance. It would require the Fleet Marshal's direct authorization and likely the Presidium itself." "Acquire it," Sobel said. She turned away from him and gestured to a large empty space on the main wall. "We'll need a primary holodeck installed here. High resolution, linked directly to your ship's tactical navigational data streams. My team will handle the interface. We also require a direct, shielded data link to your long-range communications array. We'll be exclusively listening." She spoke as if assuming his compliance. Tavin stood for a moment in the cargo bay's sterile silence. These were a far cry from the ferocious monsters of legend. They were quiet, focused, and deliberate. They gathered data instead of sharpening blades. He looked at their pale faces and soft skin, their small frames. The legends were wrong. But as Sobel flicked her gaze across a screen dense with predictive models, a new, colder fear settled in his gut. The legends were incomplete. They had mistaken the Predator's nature. time became fluid, marked only by the change of shifts on the Dauntless. The Coalition fleet held its position at Starbase Kylo, crews running pointless drills as their frustration mounted. Yave granted the access Sobel demanded. Taven had relayed the staggering request to Yave over a secure channel, expecting a flat refusal. The Marshal was silent for a long moment before responding, her voice a low rasp.
I know the contract's terms, Lieutenant. Emergency Clause 9, subsection Gamma. Full access to all informational assets without condition. The Presidium signed it. To deny her is to default and admit defeat. To grant it and have them fail is treason. A single, heavily encrypted authorization key from the Marshal's office had opened the floodgates. It seemed the Presidium's desperation had obliterated its caution. Yave had implied as much. They had signed a political death warrant that either the Katuri or the humans would execute. Taven's life became a strange duality. In the command centers and the ship's mess halls, he deflected questions from his fellow officers about his special project, offering vague replies that only fueled their curiosity. Doubt clouded their expressions, and whispers followed him down corridors. They were warriors, and their fleet was idle while the Katuri consolidated their new territory. Fights broke out over minor sites in the mess halls. Inside the cold silence of Cargo Hold 4, a different kind of work proceeded. Sobel and her team worked with a tireless energy, using shifts that ignored the ship's standard 24-hour cycle. They consumed data with a terrifying appetite, building vast, complex models on the new holotank. They mapped trade routes, analyzed linguistic drift and Katuri communications, and cross-referenced star charts with ancient mining surveys. A chaotic flood of information poured in, its military application eluding them. Sobel herself was an enigma. She spoke seldom, and then only to issue a quiet directive to her team to request another data set from Taven. She moved through the command center with a steady, deliberate pace, a simple notebook and stylus her only constant companions. She would stand before the holotank for hours, watching the intricate webs of data her team had woven. One shift, as Taven stood his observation shift, she approached him. He was watching a simulation of the last battle, the one over Phaeton V1, trying to see the flaw in the Coalition tactics that had led to their defeat.
They are tactically superior, Taven said, thinking aloud more than addressing her. Their ships are faster, their targeting more accurate. They anticipate our every move. Sobel looked at a different display, a complex flowing chart of resource allocation within Katuri space. You're asking the wrong questions, Lieutenant. Taven turned to face her. What is the right question? She looked at him, her pale eyes intense. What keeps the Katuri fleet alive? The question startled him with its fundamental simplicity. He searched for the answers a soldier would give. The grand strategist Druk, his will, their doctrine of honorable conquest, the momentum of their victories, their honor, their spirit. Sobel shook her head, a small, slight motion. The gesture was corrective, like a teacher guiding a student back to the first principles of a problem. No, she said, her voice soft but firm. You speak of metaphysics, while I'm asking about physics. What physically keeps their fleet functioning? What allows their ships to move, their life support to hum, their crews to remain a cohesive fighting force year after year, light years from their homes? She rephrased the question, stripping it of all philosophy, all notions of glory or honor, until the raw mechanical truth remained. I mean fuel, food, and orders. The word struck Taven with revelatory force. Fuel, food, orders. He thought in terms of battle lines, flanking maneuvers, and weapon arcs. Throughout his entire career, his training had framed the enemy as an opposing will he must break, a perspective that overlooked their nature as a complex logistical organism with pressures, inputs, and vulnerabilities. He looked from the glorious failed battle simulation to the mundane flowing lines of the Katuri's supply chain on Sobel's screen. He was watching a chess master analyze the board, while she was studying the cellular structure of the wood that composed it. That kind of intelligence is beyond our reach, Taven admitted, his voice tight with frustration. Targeting supply lines is a standard tactic, but it's inefficient.
They defend them too well, the routes too varied.
You're still thinking of it as a battle, Sobel said. You want to attack their logistical routes. I only want to understand them. She pointed at the holotank where a new visualization was forming. It was a map of the entire conflict sector, but instead of fleets, it showed a pulsing network of faint intersecting pathways. The Katuri distrust broadcast communications for vital command and control. Too vulnerable to interception and decryption. It's a cultural point of pride rooted in their history. They see it as a weakness of lesser species. Tavin nodded. They encode their orders on inscribed data shards carried by fast, light courier ships. Exactly, Sobel said, and the network on the map pulsed brighter. What you're looking at is their courier mesh, representing their entire logistical and command infrastructure in this sector. She zoomed in on a courier ship, a sleek, arrow-headed design. A technical schematic overlaid the image, highlighting a small, standardized panel near the aft drive section. My team found this in a routine maintenance manual acquired from a salvage freighter years ago. A standard exposed diagnostic port, present on every courier-class vessel they have produced for the last 50 years. Tavin frowned. Exposed? Why would a species so paranoid about security leave such an obvious flaw? To them, it's a feature, Sobel replied, her voice flat. It's a statement of faith in their physical security, a belief that it's unreachable. Their arrogance is the vulnerability. She grew still, staring at the pulsing, intricate network of lines that represented the Katuri war machine's lifeblood. We've been studying their culture, Lieutenant, she said, and she lowered her voice to an almost reverent whisper. Their art, their poetry, their philosophy. The flow of a sacred river on their homeworld is the basis for it all. Everything interconnects, possessing a cadence, a rhythm. She looked at him. This mesh is the river. It's their central nervous system, and our first objective is to learn the rhythm of their pulse. We're going to listen to them breathe.
The order from Fleet Marshal Ye was as shocking as it was simple. The Coalition fleet was to disengage from the entire sector. A series of strategic withdrawals, ceding vast swaths of territory the Katuri took at will. On the bridge of the Dauntless, the command staff reacted. Officers who had served with Ye for decades argued openly. Tavin stood at the back, a silent observer. As they turned to stare at him, their expressions furious and questioning. He understood the source of this madness, but silence bound him.
This is cowardice, Marshal!
Commander Dorn, a hulking Vaxxon, boomed.
We are surrendering our buffer zones, our listening post. We are inviting Jarok to strike at our core worlds.
My orders stand, Commander. Yave replied, her voice cold. She stared at the holotank as the blue sigils of her fleet began their slow, humiliating retreat. Tavin saw the lines of strain deepen around her eyes. She held the line. The contract, it seemed, was absolute. Tavin shuttled between the mutinous atmosphere on the bridge and the focused chill of Cargo Hold 4. While the fleet fled, Sobel and her team worked. The withdrawals followed a specific schedule, each a calculated move designed to elicit a specific response from the Katuri. Sobel called it shaping the environment. For Tavin, it was the most agonizing period of his life. Reports streamed in of Katuri ships advancing at will, claiming star systems that were in the Coalition for generations. The news broadcast filled with panic reports and political denunciations. The media branded Yave a traitor, a coward, and saw Tavin as her accomplice. His own people, the Terran detachment on board, shunned him. In the mess hall, they would fall silent when he approached. One evening, an old comrade, Lieutenant Corlon, cornered him in a corridor.
What is happening, Tavin?
Corlon's voice was a low, pained growl.
Have you seen the reports? They are taking everything. Why are we running?
I have my orders, Corlon, as do you, Tavin said, keeping his voice level.
Orders?
Corlon scoffed.
These aren't orders. It's surrender. The humans, Tavin.
The rumors are true, aren't they? They are on this ship. This is their doing. They are making us weak. They are advisors, Tavin said, the official lie feeling like grit in his mouth. They are poison.
Corlon snarled and turned his back on him. Tavin felt a profound isolation. He found himself spending more and more time in the cargo hold, where he found insulation from the judgment of his peers. He studied the humans at work, trying to see the pattern, the purpose behind the fleet's shame. After what felt like an eternity, Sobel summoned him and Yave to the cargo hold. The fleet marshal arrived alone, her expression locked into a state of iron control, though Tavin saw the exhaustion in the lines around her eyes. On the main holotank, Sobel displayed a map of the sector. The red of the Katuri advance had bled deep in the Coalition territory. "The Katuri believe that we have broken," Sobel began, her tone clinical. "They interpret our withdrawals as a full-scale chaotic rout. Their pursuit has been aggressive, stretching their supply lines to their maximum operational limits to keep pace." She overlaid a new set of data, the courier mesh. For weeks they had been passively monitoring it, learning its rhythms. Now the network was pulsing with a frantic, accelerated tempo. "A retreating army is unpredictable," she continued. "A routed army is predictable. Jirok assumes he has shattered our command structure. His caution has given way to aggression. His logistics have fallen into a state of complacent predictability." With a few keystrokes, she brought up a timeline. It projected forward for the next standard week. Along the timeline, icons appeared. Refueling convoys, munitions transports, food supply ships. Each icon displayed a specific location and time. "This is the result of your withdrawals, Marshal," Sobel said, gesturing to the display. "We have mapped the cadence. The Katuri have become so confident, so overextended, that their entire logistical network is now running on a predictable automated schedule. For the next week, I can tell you the exact location of every vital Katuri supply convoy in the sector, down to the minute." Yave stared at the timeline, her feathered crest quivering slightly. For the first time, Tavin saw her display an emotion other than grim resolve. It looked like hope. "This is comprehensive," Yave murmured. "We can launch a full-scale counteroffensive. Hit them everywhere at once." Sobel shook her head. "No, Marshal. Attacking the convoys is still just fighting the soldiers. We are ready to place our first sensor." She isolated a single minor point on the map. A lone Katuri courier ship on a routine run through a sector they believed was secure and empty. "Our first action will be to dispatch a single stealth-class drone to this location," Sobel stated. "He'll engage the courier. The courier will destroy it." Ye frowned. "A suicide mission? For what purpose?" "We've run over 10,000 simulations of this deployment, Marshal. Our models show a near certainty of success," Sobel said calmly. "The drone's destruction is a delivery mechanism. It's a cover. We are sending the drone to deliver a message." The launch was a quiet, functional affair. In the main tactical room, far from the humans' isolated bay, Tavin watched as a single tiny icon detached from the Dauntless and vanished into stealth mode. It was a minor gesture in the face of the Katuri's overwhelming advance. Hours later, the drone's icon reappeared in a distant system at the exact coordinates Sobel had predicted. It flared brightly as it engaged the Katuri courier, and then it winked out, destroyed. An intercepted message from the courier to its regional command was a boilerplate report. A coalition drone of unknown class engaged and neutralized. Status normal. The system logged the incident. But in Cargo Hold 4, the atmosphere was one of quiet success. On a secondary monitor, a new line of code scrolled. A simple diagnostic stream scrolled, the kind a maintenance droid might access. The stream was open, low priority, and innocuous. The signal came from the diagnostic port of the Katuri courier ship. "The limpet is active," Hess, an analyst, announced, his voice calm. "Connection established. We have a back door." The drone's destruction had been the distraction. In the microseconds before its demise, it had released a micro-limpet, a device smaller than Tavin's thumb that had magnetically attached itself to the courier's hull, right over the diagnostic port. The limpet was a passive listening device that drew its minuscule power requirements from the ship's own energy field, making it a phantom on their sensors. "Are you attempting to break their encryption?" Ye's voice broadcast into the cargo bay from the bridge. She had watched the entire event from her command chair. Breaking their encryption would be time-consuming and would risk detection," Sobel replied. "When the courier next docks and uploads its data shard, the system might flag our intrusion. We've attached our own letterbox to their door." The plan's true genius unfolded over the next few days. The limpet listened to the Katuri system, and then it spoke. Sobel's team focused on the low-level background noise of the Katuri network, supply requisitions, personnel transfers, minor course corrections for automated vessels. "The Katuri system runs on trust," Sobel explained to Tavin, pointing to the data stream. "They believe their physical mesh is inviolable, so, while they heavily encrypt their primary orders, simple system handshakes authenticate their low-level logistical data. The design trust itself." Her team injected tiny alterations into the data stream. They were packets of information mimicking the network's protocols, which the network accepted as authentic. They rerouted a shipment of spare engine coils from one depot to another, adding 3 weeks to its delivery time. They altered a patrol route by a mere 2 degrees, just enough to create a small temporary blind spot in a sensor grid. They pushed back a maintenance schedule for a communication relay by a single shift. Each change was a single misaligned cog. Sobel and her team were adding thousands of them. They systematically corrupted its blood, teaching it to lie to itself. Tavin watched, mesmerized and horrified. This was something else entirely. The intellectual sabotage was so subtle, so pervasive. The humans wielded a virus of information, a weapon far more insidious than any blade. Grand Strategist Duroc had prosecuted the war with an accuracy that exploited the Coalition's doctrinal rigidity and honorable predictability. He interrupted their full-scale retreat as the final predictable outcome of his superior strategy. It was time for the coup de grace. His proclamation, broadcast across all channels as was Katuri tradition, was triumphant and arrogant. "I have shattered the Coalition," he declared, his image projected into the bridges of 1,000 ships. "I have broken their will, their fleet scattered. We shall now deliver the final glorious blow to end this conflict and bring peace to the sector under the enlightened guidance of the Combine. Our target? Starbase Prime, the heart of their command structure in this region. We will meet them there and accept their unconditional surrender." On the bridge of the Dauntless, a murmur of alarm went through the crew. Starbase Prime was a vital strategic asset, now sheltering the bulk of the retreating, demoralized Coalition fleet. A direct assault by Duroc's Grand Fleet would be a massacre. Only Yave remained calm. She gave a single curt order. "Hold your positions. Await my command." Tavin raced to cargo hold 4. He found Sobel and her team in their usual state of quiet, intense focus. Duroc's speech was playing on a small monitor in the corner, the sound muted. They watched the courier mesh. "He's taken the bait," Sobel said without preamble, gesturing to the holotank. "As expected." "Bait?" Tavin asked. "Colonel, he is moving his entire fleet to assault Starbase Prime. He will annihilate us." "Nah, Lieutenant," Sobel corrected him. "He's moving his fleet to where he believes you are." For weeks, the corrupted data packets had been working. Minor patrol reports, subtly altered, had overlooked Coalition ships that had already departed. Automated sensor buoys, their maintenance schedules delayed, had returned faint, ghostly readings. Now, as Duroc's fleet began its advance, Sobel's team amplified the effect. Using their access to the mesh, they corrupted the Combine's own reconnaissance network, causing it to echo and amplify its own data. They turned the Katuri's own sensors into a hall of mirrors. On Katuri tactical displays, the area around Starbase Prime bloomed with thousands of false energy signatures. It looked as if the entire Coalition fleet, every last destroyer and dreadnought, had gathered for a desperate final stand. The scenario matched Katuri Doctrine's prediction exactly. A cornered enemy, lashing out with honor and futility. "He'll see what he wants to see," Sobel murmured, watching the data streams. A glorious final battle to cement his legacy. A cold dread settled deep in Tavin's bones. The trap was psychological. The humans were fighting Jirok's own ego, his own doctrine, his culture's own deeply ingrained expectations. The journey to Starbase Prime took 3 weeks. For Tavin and the rest of the Coalition fleet, hiding in a remote, unmapped nebula, the waiting was intense. They could only watch on long-range sensors as Jirok's armada, a magnificent, terrible wave of crimson warglyphs, closed in on the Phantom fleet. Then they arrived. Tavin watched from the bridge of the Dauntless, his chest tight. Jirok's fleet dropped out of hyperspace in a perfect, awe-inspiring battle array. They arrived ready for the fight of their lives. And they found an empty void. The system was empty. The thousands of energy signatures that had lured them across the sector dissolved, revealed as a complex web of overlapping signals from a handful of cheap broadcasting decoys. Tavin could almost feel the confusion radiating from the Katuri fleet. He could picture the chaos on Jirok's bridge, the frantic technicians trying to explain how their trusted sensors had so catastrophically failed. They sat there, a grand army assembled for a phantom battle, their array perfect, their weapons charged, their purpose gone. A cold certainty washed over Tavin. He watched the master hunter, poised to strike, realize it had been stalking a ghost. And then, as the Katuri fleet hung there in stunned disarray, the trap sprang. On the main holotank of the Dauntless's command center, and in the cold, quiet bay of the humans, a different map lit up. It was a map of the entire Katuri rear echelon. "Execute," Sobel said, calm and clear over the command channel. All at once, across a dozen systems, the true Coalition fleet struck. Small, fast strike groups, guided by the up-to-the-minute intelligence Sobel had provided, hit their targets. The strikes were targeted, bereft of the glory of fleet engagements. Icons on the holotank blinked out. A primary fuel depot in the Perseus arm, left with only a skeleton defense crew, vaporized. A central command and control relay in a belt they believed was secure went silent. Missile strikes crippled a reserve shipyard where dozens of warships were undergoing repairs, hitting their primary reactors. Their strikes met no resistance. Jirok had taken his entire shield with him to chase a ghost, leaving his heart and lungs exposed. Tavin watched, his terroring soul recoiling from the sight. This was butchery, a stark contrast to battle. A predator disabled its prey before the fight had even begun. The Katuri fleet came apart piece by logistical piece, while its commanders drifted, powerless, in an empty system hundreds of light years away. Sobel's plan entered its next phase. "Isolate flagships Vindicator and Harbinger," she commanded, her voice cutting through the clinical quiet of her command center. She highlighted 2 icons within the confused Katuri fleet, Admirals Darnell and Vess. According to our psychological profiles, they are the most aggressive, most likely to push past the decoy field to investigate independently. The 2 highlighted flagships broke from the array, beginning a cautious advance into the system. "They're separating from their escort wings," Hess reported. "Of course they are," Sobel said. "Their doctrine calls for reconnaissance in force. It's what their training dictates." She turned to her communications analyst. "Lee, use the mesh. Corrupt the patrol vectors being sent to their escort squadrons. Insert ghost signals at the edge of the system and flag them as high-priority anomalies. The escorts be redirected to investigate, following their own protocols. Make it look like a sensor malfunction is compounding Jirok's chaotic attempts to regain control." "Executing," Lee replied, her fingers a blur across her console. On the holotank, Tavin watched in disbelief as the escort ships protecting the 2 Katuri admirals peeled away, following phantom orders born in this cold cargo bay. The 2 flagships now drifted isolated, alone in a sea of ghost. "Marshal Yave," Sobel spoke over the comm, cool and exact. "Your Marine teams have clearance for insertion. We provided them with complete internal schematics of the flagships, along with the current patrol schedules and security access codes. And their targets are the 2 admirals.
You will take them alive and safe. They're more than commanders. They're keys.
The boarding actions were swift and overwhelming. Taven monitored the feeds, his stomach churning. The Coalition Marine teams, armed with Sobel's intelligence, moved through the Katuri flagships like ghosts. They bypassed security patrols rerouted by false orders. They used access codes fed to them by the humans to walk through locked doors. They deployed soporific gas grenades into barracks minutes before a scheduled shift change. They reached the bridges of both the Vindicator and the Harbinger with minimal resistance. The Katuri crews, confused and trying to make sense of the Phantom Fleet, the surprise attack took them. The Marines captured Admirals Darnell and Vess with all hands safe on both sides. Within an hour, the Marines secured them aboard Coalition cruisers, and their personal command encryption keys, the highest level of authentication in the Katuri military, were in human hands. The final component locked into place. In Cargo Hold 4, the atmosphere was electric with a cold, focused energy. Hess, the analyst who specialized in Katuri command protocols, worked feverishly.
I have the keys. Integrating them with the command handshake from the courier mesh, I can bypass the central authentication query. I can make the system think I am high command.
Prepare the order, Sobel said, her voice a low, steady hum. Taven watched, his mouth dry. He understood now, all of it. The data analysis, the withdrawals, the limpet, the Phantom Fleet, the logistical strikes, the targeted captures. It had all been a chain of inexorable logic, leading to a single devastating moment. They had crawled inside their enemy's mind and hijacked it.
What will the order be?
He asked, the words feeling heavy and thick in his throat. Sobel looked at him, her expression shifting to something that resembled pity more than triumph or malice. The most believable one, she said. The one that uses their own political structure against them. She dictated the message, and Hess typed it into the system. The message was a single system-wide recall order, Priority Omega, the highest possible level, authenticated with the captured keys of 2 of Jirok's own admirals. The message was concise and devastating. To all Combine forces in the Denub Trisector, High Command recall. Cease all hostilities. Return to anchor systems immediately. Evidence of widespread coup attempt by Jirok loyalist factions. Grand Strategist Jirok implicated as ringleader. Secure home systems. Await further orders. Authentication Omega. For the Combine. Send it, Sobel ordered. Hess hit the key. For a long, agonizing moment, the Grand Katuri fleet, still clustered in confused disarray around the empty Starbase Prime system, remained motionless. Taven held his breath. Had they gone too far? Would the Katuri see through the lie? Then the holotank changed. First one, then dozens, then in hundreds. The crimson warglyphs of the Katuri fleet turned. Their disciplined battle arrays, the pride of their military, dissolved into a chaotic scramble. The authenticated order, coming from their own trusted mesh and signed by their own admirals, bypassed Jirok's authority entirely. It spoke directly to every captain in his fleet. The war ended with a frantic, confused retreat. Jirok, stranded on his flagship, his grand fleet melting away around him, broadcast frantic, countermanding orders. It was too late. The virus of doubt had taken root. The message had named his own political faction as traitors. To obey him now was to risk execution. The most powerful military force in the sector tore itself apart and fled from a single crafted lie. Taven Tel watched the great Katuri armada scatter and run, and in place of triumph, a profound, bottomless dread filled him. The humans bypassed the war, ending it. They had reached into the heart of the Katuri Combine and flipped a switch. The peace negotiations were a formality. The Katuri Combine, its military in disarray and its political structure fractured by the Phantom coup, sued for peace within a single week. The Combine recalled Grand Strategist Jirok, and he disappeared, a victim of the political paranoia the humans had manufactured. The treaty signing took place at Starbase Kylo, overseen by a neutral galactic mediator. Taven stood at the back of the chamber observing.
Fleet Marshal Yave led the Coalition delegation, her face impassive, regal. The Katuri envoy looked bewildered and broken. The mediator, a ponderous life form whose body was a slow swirl of metallic dust, read out the proposed terms, standard reparations, ceding of the contested territories back to the Coalition, a 10-year non-aggression pact. It was a victor's peace, but a conventional one. Then a side door opened and Colonel Sobel entered the chamber. Her analyst flanked her. A murmur went through the assembled dignitaries. She walked directly to the negotiation table and placed an optic data screen before the mediator. Coalition finds these terms unacceptable, she said, her calm voice carried across the silent hall. Yave's expression remained impassive, but she gave Sobel a nearly imperceptible nod. She had been briefed. This, too, was part of the contract's grim logic. She yielded the floor. The mediator scanned the optic data screen, its optical sensors glowing brightly. Its calm demeanor vanished. Colonel, these terms are monstrous. They are an existential violation of Katuri's sovereignty. Sobel kept her voice low. Read them aloud. The mediator hesitated, then complied, its synthesized voice tight with strain. 1. The permanent and verifiable dismantling of the Katuri courier mesh system. They will conduct all command and control communications henceforth on open, monitored broadcast channels. 2. All primary Katuri shipyards will be subject to Coalition oversight and inspection for a period of no less than 50 standard years. 3. The dissolution of the Grand Strategist military rank and the decentralization of their strategic command structure. Localized sector commands will replace it. The Katuri envoy slumped in his chair as if struck. The terms were an evisceration. They demanded the removal of the foundational systems of trust, of strategy, of culture that define the Katuri. This is not a treaty, the mediator protested. This is the systematic lobotomization of a civilization. Sobel's expression was unwavering. She looked at the Katuri envoy, then at the mediator, then at the stunned Coalition delegates. Her gaze was implacable. This is prevention, she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. We are not punishing them. Punishment is an exercise in emotion. We have studied your histories. The Katuri doctrine of ritualized expansionist warfare is an inherent systemic instability. It guarantees future conflict. We're here to prevent the next war. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. These are the terms. They are final. The Katuri, their fleet scattered, command structure broken, and political will shattered, agreed. As her team packed their equipment in the cold silence of Cargo Hold 4, preparing to depart on the Auditor, Tavin approached Sobel one last time. They were wiping the server banks, the monitors dark. They erased the strange, sterile sanctuary as if it had never existed. Colonel, he began, asking the question that had been forming in his mind for weeks. Why? Why do you fight this way? It lacks both honor and glory. Sobel paused in her work, turning to face him. Her expression held, for the first time, a trace of something beyond neutrality. A hint of weariness surfaced in her eyes, the exhaustion of a being who sees the universe as a series of flawed systems in desperate need of repair. We see war as a fundamental failure, Lieutenant, she said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. A breakdown in the logic of a system. When a machine breaks, you open the casing, you analyze the schematics, and you find the faulty component. You find the broken gear, the corrupted line of code, the flawed piece of logic that is causing the entire system to malfunction. She looked past him, her gaze distant, as if seeing 1,000 other conflicts on 1,000 other worlds. The soldiers, the ships, the grand strategies, they're not the problem. They're symptoms. They're the sparks flying from the broken machine. Her pale blue eyes met his, and he understood the terrifying, absolute clarity of her worldview. We break the system that creates them. The Galactic Presidium broadcast its session on every channel. Tavin watched from the observation deck of the Dauntless. In succession, The delegates rose to praise the Elysian Coalition for its stunning victory against Katuri aggression. They lauded Fleet Marshal Ye's novel strategy. The official record attributed the victory entirely to Yave, erasing the humans. Then came the second item on the agenda. A delegate from a species Tavin had never before seen proposed a motion.
In light of the recent instability in the galaxy,
The delegate announced.
it is the view of this body that we should take this opportunity to unanimously reaffirm the Galactic Concordance on warfare, specifically Article 1, the absolute and permanent ban on human involvement in any capacity in all interstellar conflicts.
The vote was instantaneous and unanimous. The beings who had just benefited from the humans' work voted to keep them chained. The method terrified them. They wanted the victory, but found the cold logic that had achieved it repellent. Months later, Tavin stood on the bridge of his own command, a small patrol cruiser assigned to the newly pacified border. He looked out at the star charts, at the quiet, peaceful systems that had so recently been a battlefield. His second-in-command approached, holding an optic data screen. It was Corlon. The other Tellarine held his gaze for a long moment. The open hostility had vanished. In its place was a new, wary respect and a flicker of something like fear. Corlon gave a slow, single nod, then turned back to his console. Tavin understood the reason for the ban now. The reason was different from the legends of human ferocity. Ferocity was a trait the galaxy understood. It was loud and hot and honorable in its own savage way. The truth carried a deeper chill. The galaxy banned humans from war because they treated it as something else entirely. They treated it as a problem to solve, an equation to balance. To them, the grand, tragic art of interstellar conflict was a flawed piece of engineering. Other species played the game, moving their pieces across the board with honor and skill. The humans saw only the board itself, the lines, the squares, the delicate structure of the whole thing. And they were willing to crouch down, acquire a new perspective, find the single, fragile leg that held the entire table up, and with calm objectivity, break it. They acted to break the game itself, ensuring no one could play it again, instead of merely winning. This was the truth behind the ban. That was the devaluation of all things a soldier held dear. The galaxy feared their terrifying transcendent sanity more than any imagined savagery. It feared the quiet predator that lurked in the cold, clear light of logic.